of the pandemic. And I want to acknowledge that throughout that process, at different times, government has sought to intervene and to alleviate the hardships which many taxi drivers are experiencing. And there's no doubt the PUP payment is probably the single biggest contribution to ensuring that taxi drivers in their own personal finances have been able to stay afloat. But what I don't believe we have done, as we have done in other industries, is support them in their business costs. Now, I should acknowledge that following a meeting with the Taoiseach, Minister Ryan announced a package of over 6.5 million aimed at the taxi industries, and that mostly focused on statutory costs, amounting to about €290 per driver, dealing with those regulatory issues like licences and so on. I suppose what it didn't deal with were the other non-statutory costs which drivers had, and insurance being the primary one. And the Restart grant, which I know many businesses have benefited from Restart grants, the Restart grant, unfortunately, is still only available if you come off your pandemic unemployment payment. And for many drivers, they're reluctant to do that because they aren't certain about the level of business. And obviously, the Delta variant has knocked that confidence even further, and the pushing out of the of indoor dining. So I suppose what I would say to the government is that we have made some progress on the statutory costs, but on the non-statutory costs, on insurance and other issues like that, we still haven't come to the table, and much of it is because we're relying on the Department of Social Welfare to administer a support scheme for taxi drivers. But I think what's of principal concern to drivers, Minister, is the issue of the age of the vehicle. And can I say I am fully committed to decarbonisation of the fleet, not just the taxi fleet, but of the vehicle fleet in Ireland. And I understand there are significant grants for electric vehicles. But at this time, the idea of making a once-in-a-decade investment in your business in order to renew your vehicle because it's at the end of its vehicle life, it's very difficult to justify. And while there has been extensions in the previous year, my principal question to you tonight, Minister, is: will you extend the age limit on the vehicle life for the 9-year rule, and to extend it into the future to the end of 2022? My second question, and I'll follow it up in the follow-up, is the commitment which you very strongly gave to make sure that those on the PUP payment could continue to have their PUP entitlement and work up to the limit of 960 until February next year. Minister, I understand the Department of Social Welfare are interpreting that differently, and that those people on the 203 figure will actually have to return to work in September and a cut-off point. And I'll expand on that in the later contribution. You might concentrate on the vehicle life during your initial response.
Minister.
Thank you. I would like to thank Deputy McAuliffe for raising this matter here today and for giving me this opportunity to set out how the government has allocated over 24 million to targeted measures to support this sector since the start of the pandemic. The government is acutely aware of the very difficult situation facing the taxi and small business small public service vehicle industry as a result of the impact of the pandemic. I recognise that low passenger demand has meant that many SPSV operators have simply been unable to work and have relied on the PUP. I understand that many operators have had to temporarily suspend their licences in order to reduce major costs, such as insurance and dispatch operator fees. In response to this, the government has sought to ensure that a range of sector-specific and more general supports are available to SPSV operators to provide tangible assistance in the face of these impacts. In terms of targeted sector-specific supports, over €24 million has been allocated to the sector since the start of the pandemic. Part of this includes the package of measures that I recently announced, worth €6.5 million, which will mean that SPSV standard vehicle licence renewal fees, include usually €150, will be waived in 2022 at an estimated cost of €3 million. These fees were also waived in 2021 at a further estimated cost of €2.6 million. The National Transport Authority has been provided with €3.5 million in funding to enable the establishment of a scheme to refund NCT fees €55, and motor tax for SPSV operators, which is €95 for a 12-month period. The commencement date of this scheme is yet to be determined. Further details of the schemes, including how to apply, should be available during the third quarter of this year from the National Transport Authority. A significant portion of the allocated €24 million relates to supporting the transition of the taxi fleet towards zero low-emission vehicles, an objective to which I am wholeheartedly committed. The replacement of a vehicle is the largest single cost faced by any SPSV operator, and the funding available through this ESPSV grant scheme directly supports the purchase of electric vehicles. The overall funding of the scheme was increased from €1 million to €15 million for 2021, and furthermore a scrappage component for older vehicles was introduced, doubling the amount payable under the scheme to €20,000. Additional amounts are available for those switching to vehicles which are both electric and wheelchair accessible. Interest in the scheme has been very strong, with over 700 applications received since the scheme opened in February. 65 new vehicles have already been licensed under the scheme at a cost of €1.2 million. These sector-specific measures augment and enhance the range of COVID-19 support measures with broad eligibility criteria the government has put in place. Taxi operators can and have availed of these critical supports, which include PUP, liquidity and investment measures, tax relief measures, such as the enterprise. There's also the Enterprise Support Grant, worth up to €1,000 towards business reopening costs, such as personal protective equipment, vehicle costs and cleaning supplies. The government is committed to supporting drivers' return to work as society starts reopening. That's why self-employed individuals, including taxi drivers, can earn up to €960 in a given 8-week period, net of expenses, while keeping their PUP entitlement. With regard to the specific questions around that, it will have to be the Minister of Social Protection, Heather Humphreys, to answer further questions in its operation into next year. From my understanding, it will be extended along the lines that was announced when we announced the taxi measures. The NTA has also extended age limits for taxis and hackneys 3 times since the start of the pandemic. The most recent extension made last month ensures that no vehicle will be forced to exit the fleet due to age limits alone in 2021. Furthermore, and to answer your question, Deputy McAuliffe, I have asked officials in my department now to engage with the NTA to make sure that we will bring an extension of that measure to the end of 2022, which I hope will help add to the other measures and provide some support for those taxi drivers who have been in real difficulty through this whole period.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy McAuliffe.
Well, Gurmagadar, and I want to welcome that very welcome news that the government will be extending it till the end of 2022. I know there are many that would wish it would go further, but certainly at this time, your commitment here in the House to that will be very welcome news to those people who are facing that cliff edge. I understand it may have to go through public consultation with the NTA, and obviously I would encourage us to accelerate that process as much as possible. Minister, I do want to thank you for the engagement which you've had with me and with the representative bodies. And I'd say to you that I really genuinely believe that while the NTA is the regulatory body, and the Taxi Advisory Council represents both taxi passengers and the taxi industry, that the representative bodies really are agents of change and agents in order for us to deliver projects like the decarbonisation of the fleet. And we do that by building up credibility with them, by engaging with them, by ensuring that they know that there is a body on their side to protect them as a key part of the public transport network. I accept what you say about the Minister for Social Welfare answering my questions, and I have raised it directly with her, and I will follow that up. But we have a situation at the moment, and I welcome what you say, that there will be change in this area. But as at present, it's proposed that those drivers that were on the €350 PUP will continue to work on a taxi rank and receive their PUP up until February next year. But those taxi drivers on €203 will not. So we'll have 2 different taxi drivers on the same rank, one receiving the PUP and the other not. I think that's an anomaly. I think the Minister recognises it's an anomaly. I imagine the Taoiseach recognises it's an anomaly. It's something we should iron out. And again, get back to the industry, communicate what we want to do, build up a relationship with them, both at the NTA and at government level. And Minister, I promise you, this is a group of people. These are ordinary, decent taxi drivers that want to deliver this public service, and they want government support for it.
Minister, to conclude on this topic.
No, I'd agree, Chair. I mean, our taxi drivers provide a really important service right across the country in different circumstances. And in my own city in Dublin, they're part of our public transport system. They're an essential service for a lot of people who maybe can't drive themselves or often provide a more economic way. The problem we've had in the last year is that the business has disappeared. Tourism business hasn't been there, airport business wasn't there. Social nightlife, all the corporate business, everything has gone. It's starting to come back now. And with that, we will start to see fares coming back. And that's the key way, I think, of helping drivers get back on their feet. I do think the measures, I don't know for any one individual taxi driver say, well, it's only a part of the cost, but we have looked at every single way in which we can possibly reduce some of those costs. And also I'd have to give credit to Minister Heather Humphreys, devise mechanisms where that income disregard was possible, because it encouraged people to keep on the road, to keep actually, even where the volumes were very low and it didn't make economic sense, to try and to make it work. How she actually did, or how that system, that PUP system, how far she can stretch it in terms of having a different rule for different sectors, it's something that she rightly has to make the call on. But I think we are in the closing phases now, hopefully, of managing this pandemic. And yes, I think it's important we keep some of the social supports in place early of next year. But what I'd expect as we get fully vaccinated, that we'll see the key thing we want, which is business back. And I think in those circumstances, when people start to look then at, in terms of maybe getting a new car, what they'll actually then turn to is this incredibly popular scheme, and actually will be a fundamentally change the whole taxi business and actually make it much cheaper to run a taxi, because it's the lower fuel costs, the lower maintenance costs are the key. And I think that then hopefully kick in with the grants we're given to help the taxi industry out.
Moving on to the second topical issue.